Hi guys, it's Davin here at Brewbitz.com. Behind the camera as usual we've got James. Say hello James. One of the things we always get asked for in the shop is about brewing your own beer from grain, from scratch. And everybody seems to think that it's quite complicated. It's a really lengthy, long process and you need lots of expensive equipment to make it. Well, what we've done is we've come up with a simple, easy to use method that you can make in your own kitchen on your hob, and we've given you all of the equipment and all the ingredients you're going to need in a foolproof kit that you're going to be able to make 2 gallons of fantastic beer at home, quickly, easily, in an afternoon. So in our kits come all of the equipment you need, including things like the barrels, buckets and everything else that you're going to need to make it up. And also all of the ingredients, all the grains, the hops and everything else that you're going to need to brew one of our classic beers. Now here I've got our Coldharbour IPA, and these are our own recipes that we've come up with and designed, and they're based on your classic beers. So today we're going to show you how to brew up the Coldharbour IPA. But take a look at the rest of the range, because we've also got an amber ale, an Avalon amber ale. We've got a Froome special, and we've also got a Pilton Pride best bitter as well. All based on classic recipes, but given the Brewbitz Davin twist. So, why don't we get brewing? So let's show you what comes in your Brewbitz 2 gallon All Grain Micro Brewery. So let's start off with what you're going to put in at the end. We've given you a barrel, a couple of things then we're going to need. Oh, let's take all this lot out in one go. Okay, because in here we've packaged a few things together. We've got a peg. We'll explain all of this when we get to it. We've got a lid for your stockpot, a sieve. I'll get to what's in the bucket in a moment, because that's all your ingredients. We've even got a stockpot so that we can do our boiling and mashing. We've got a lid for our buckets. We've got a hop bag, what we call a mashing and sparging bag. We've got a hydrometer, and this is in its own little trial jar as well. We've got a paddle so that we can stir everything. We've got the tap for the barrel, always handy. We've got some sterilizer so that we can sterilise everything and keep it nice and clean. We've got a siphon. We've got some yeast. I just nearly missed that. We've got a thermometer so you can check your temperatures and make sure we're getting exactly the right temperatures. Your instructions, and lastly, a label for your barrel so that everybody knows you are making a Coldharbour IPA. One of the things with this is that this is science, and we've given you instructions in here, quite thorough, quite simple. Follow them, because if you add a little bit too much or you go a little bit too high in the temperature, you can end up not getting the best beer that you possibly can. So, here's your yeast. We've also got a few bags of hops, and these are all for different stages. We've got a bag of priming sugar, something called Irish moss, and we'll get onto that a bit later as well. And then we've got your main ingredient, which is your bag of grain. And we've already put in this bag all of the different grains to make up our Coldharbour IPA. Right, now you've seen all the equipment, one thing else left to have is something to keep you going. Now, I had a bit of a hard night last night, so I'm on the cups of tea today. Normally, and you might even see me a little bit later with a pint in my hand. So, James, so we get brewing. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill our kettle up and put it onto the boil. The next thing we're going to do, just turn that off for the moment so I can talk to you, is we're going to take our mashing and sparging bag, this is the big bag, and we're going to lower it into our stock pot. what we're doing is we need to tuck it over the top, and it's got two little ties. We need to pull these ties tight, and we're going to need to tie it up tightly, but not too tightly, because a little bit later we are going to have to remove it, and when we are removing it later it's going to be very hot, so make sure you tie it into a bow that we can undo again later, and then just gently inside form it to the inside. Simple as that. Right, let's get our kettle on the boil. One of the other things we're going to need that's not in the kit is a measuring jug. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 9 pints of boiling water into our pan. 1. So this is my 9th pint of boiling water going in now. Lovely. And then the next thing we need to add are 3 pints of cold tap water. So that's 9 pints of boiling water and 3 pints of cold tap water. We're going to give it a good stir to mix the hot and cold water around. And with our thermometer, we're going to check the temperature. We're aiming for a temperature of exactly 70 degrees. And it takes a little bit of a time for our thermometer to do its job, so don't just plonk it in and pull it straight out again. Plonk it in and leave it in there for a little bit of time to see what temperature it's coming out at. Alright, now my temperature is coming out a little bit low, so I'm going to put the heat on and I'm going to bring it up gently to 70 degrees Celsius. Now we're at 70, it's time to add our big bag of grain. Now, we need to do this slowly and gently, and the way I tend to do it is take one corner of my bag. I'm left-handed, using right-handed pair of scissors, not the easiest thing in the world to do. We're now going to very gently pour our grain into our water, and what we're going to do is we're going to stir it as we go. Now the reason why we're doing this slowly and gently and stirring is because the grain will have a tendency, if we just lumped it all in one go, to form dough balls, as they're called. And basically these are big clumps of grain where the outside is really gooey and wet, but the inside is still perfectly dry. And if we get a situation happening like that, then we get the sugars from the grains on the outside being turned to, the starches on the outside of the grain being turned to sugar, but not the ones on the inside. And so we don't end up with the right amount of sugar in our beer, and therefore we don't end up with the right amount of alcohol. So keep going till you've emptied the bag, as I say, nice and gently. Keep stirring because there's a lot of grain to get in here. And as I say, we don't want to form any dough balls. This smells absolutely amazing. It's kind of like smell you get from hot Weetabix or hot shredded wheat or Ovaltine. It's absolutely fantastic smell when you're doing this. Oh, didn't realise where the end of my bag was. My bag was. There we go. Right, finish giving that a good stir. Now adding the grains to the water will now have dropped the temperature of the water, which is what we need it to, because we are going to be doing what we call mashing. Now we've added the grains to the water, this is called our mash, and we need to mash at exactly 65 degrees. We'll be mashing for an hour. Now what that means is that in this process, the starch in the grains are going to be turned to sugar. And so we need to get exactly 65 degrees Celsius. So again, pop your thermometer in and check your temperature. And if we've got this right, you should be pretty much there. Which I am. So, I'm going to pop the lid on, and every 5 to 10 minutes I'm going to return to my pot and check the temperature and add some heat if necessary. My mash has been on for a few minutes now, so it's time to take the temperature. So with my beer paddle I'm going to give it a good stir. Okay, make sure it's all mixed up so there's no hot spots and no cold spots, it's all even. Now I'm going to pop my thermometer in, and as I said, just like before, it takes a little bit of time for you to get an accurate reading, so just take your time with it. And we're aiming at 65 degrees Celsius. And you'll see the thermometer shoots right up and then it really slows down. Now this is coming out at about 63 degrees C, so I need to add a little bit more heat. So I'm going to put my heat now on low. Now there's lots of different stoves. I've here got a halogen hob, you might have a gas hob or an induction hob. So you need to know effectively your gas or your hob so that you can add the right amount of heat. So we're going to add it gently, because if we add too much heat, it's very difficult to take it away without damaging the grain. So we'll do a little bit at a time. So I've just put my heat on very low here, and I'm going to give it 30 seconds of heat. After those 30 seconds, we're going to turn it off, take the temperature again, I'll give it a good stir, and take the temperature again. We're not going to rush this stage because this is the important part of it. This is the science happening now. And we need to make sure that we get to 65 degrees, ideally not over. So take your time. Okay, those 30 seconds have added an extra degree. So I need to do that one more time to put a bit more temperature into it. So as I said, give it some low heat for 30 seconds, give it a good stir, check the temperature again, and keep doing that until you're up to 65 degrees. As soon as you're back to 65 degrees, pop the lid back on and leave it for a little bit longer. Our grains have had 60 minutes of mashing, and now it's time to move on. So come on in, James, have a quick look at this. You'll see the grains have settled down. One of the things, remember I said earlier to don't tie your bag too tight because you're going to need to take it off. This is the time now we need to take it off. So you need to untie it and then gently pull your cards tight to close your bag up. Okay, now be very careful because what we need to do now is we need to lift our grains out of the liquid. Now the liquid is now called our wort. Now in your kit, you've got your sieve, and gently lift it out. You can see there's some wort running out. We need to pop our sieve down into our pan and then lower our bag of grain gently into the sieve. Okay, arrange the top like that. And now, I'm going to leave that just to dribble for a bit. We need to put the kettle on. The next step is what we call sparging. Now in our grain in here there's a lot of sugars that are still within the grains, and we need to rinse the grains. So what we're going to do very slowly is a pint of boiling water at a time. We're going to dribble this over the grains, and this is going to help get all of the rest of the sugar out. So the slower the better. And it does take a little bit of time to do our sparging, and ideally you want to make a pint of water over the top take about 60 seconds of dribbling. Make sure you cover the whole of the bag, don't just keep it in one place. And keep the nice gentle dribble going. That's the first of 8 pints. So we're going to sparge in total with 8 pints of boiling water. So this is the last of my 8 pints of boiling water dribbled over my bag of grain. So now my grain is sparged. And I'm going to leave it sat here now for about 5 minutes just to allow any of that water to drip down through and into the pan below. Now that our grains have had a chance to drain, lift up the bag slightly and allow a little bit of the heat to go out before you're going to pick it up. So now lift it up. Now it has been sat in the wort slightly, so let it dribble out for a few moments. I'm going to get rid of my sieve. Right here, just got a bowl. It's just going to make my life easier, so I don't get shouted at dribbling a tiny bit of wort everywhere. Right, that's that gone. We don't need those anymore. Our grain's spent, so either feed that to the chickens or pop it onto your compost heap. Right, back to this liquid now, which is now called our wort. What we need to do is we need to put the heat on, pop the top on, and we need to bring this up to a rolling boil. As soon as your wort's up to what we call a rolling boil, now this is what we call a rolling boil, not a simmer, we actually need it to be boiling fiercely. You need to take your contents of hop pack 1 and your hopping bag. And what we're going to do is just simply put the contents of hop pack 1 into our bag. Now for our IPA here, we need to then lower that in gently, and using the peg that comes in the kit, peg it to the handle. So these hops that we've added in here are going to add our bitters to the wort, to our beer, and we need to boil those fiercely like that on a proper rolling boil, not a simmer, a rolling boil for 45 minutes. So my wort has been boiling away now vigorously for 45 minutes, and it's time to add our next packet of hops. Now, the first packet of hops we added were what we call our bittering hops, and they add all our bitters. This is going to be also some bittering hops, but these hops added at this late stage will also add quite a bit of aroma. So in goes hop pack 2. Oh, not quite got all of them. There we go. That's it. Lovely. And at this stage, we also need to add our little packet of Irish moss. Now, our Irish moss, when you look at it, looks a bit peculiar. And when you have a good look at it, it looks a little bit like seaweed. Well, there's a good reason for that. So in that goes as well, and we re-peg that to our handle, and we carry on the boil for another 15 minutes. So what's that Irish moss? That Irish moss is seaweed, and basically in our beer now there are some proteins, and those proteins, if we don't get rid of them, will cause our beer to be hazy once it's tried to be cleared and ready for drinking. So what that Irish moss does is soaks up all those proteins and helps us get a nice, crisp, clear beer. It's now been 60 minutes since we put our wort onto the boil, and we now have to add hop pack 3. All the hops in this hop pack are aroma hops, and these are going to add all our lovely citrusy, piney aromas to our beer. So the lid needs to go back on, like so. We also need to turn the heat off, because the next step starts now. We need to cool our wort down as fast as possible. And what I've done here is I've poured off a small amount of cold water into my sink, and I've lowered in my stock pot. Keeping the lid on, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to get any water into our wort. We now need to cool our wort down as quickly as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a gentle flow of water flowing into my sink with the tap. And now the water is going to flow around the outside, down the overflow, and hopefully cool our wort down as quick as possible. Right, give me a couple of moments and I'll let that switch that back on in a moment. The reason why we need to cool our wort down as fast as possible is to do with cold break. And cold break again is a way of helping our beer clear. And this is caused by us cooling the beer as fast as possible. So what happens if you've got a sink but it doesn't have a overflow, or if you haven't got a sink at all? Well, you could always use a bowl and ice and put it into an ice bath and keep topping it up with ice as the ice melts, and that will cool down your wort as quick as possible. So I'm going to put my tap back on. Nice and gentle flow. I'm going to let it run until our wort is cooled down to 25 degrees Celsius. As soon as we put our wort in our sink, anything that was going to come into contact with it needs to be sterilised from that point on. So I sterilised my bucket, my siphon, and also my thermometer. And I've been regularly checking the temperature of our wort as it's been cooling. And now we've got down to 25 degrees. So I'm going to move I've got an extendable tap which makes my life a bit easier. I'm going to remove our hops from our wort. There's still quite a lot of wort in them, so I'm going to give a gentle squeeze just to try and recover some of that out of it, but not too much, otherwise you'd be squeezing for days to get all that out. Lovely. So I'm going to take the pan out of the sink. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to siphon our beer, or our wort as it is at the moment, from the pan and into my bucket. So, because of what's happened in here, the cold break, there's now quite a lot of sediments on the bottom of the pan. And so we're going to try and not disturb that. So come on in, James, have a quick look at this for me. We're just literally going to lower the end of the siphon here. This is what we call a sediment trap, and that's going to prevent some of the sediment from getting into the siphon and down into our bucket. And this end, what we do is we give a good suck. And you'll notice the beer starts to flow. Lower it down in and gradually lower the end of your siphon in your pot with the wort as it gradually drops down. Whilst I'm siphoning off, so to make sure that we get as much wort as possible, you can see I've put a book under one end so I can tilt the pan. And as you can see, this is all the sediment from the boil, which was from the grain and also from the powder that's come out of our hops. So just keep trying to get as much in as possible, but just before we start to get all of that sediment, I'm going to pull my trap up. So almost, a little bit more, that's it. Lovely. Okay, so we don't need that anymore, so let's pop that to one side. Get my little cookbook out of the way and bring this up. Now, on the side of the bucket there will be a 2-gallon mark. This one's a little bit faded because I've used this bucket a few times. Apologies for that, but yours will be a lot clearer. Let me just wipe my hands off a second, and I need to find my jug because I need now to top it back up to that 2-gallon mark because we've lost a bit of water with our boil, it's evaporated off. So I need to bring it back up to that 2-gallon mark. So as I thought, lost about a pint. And then I'm going to add an extra half a pint to it as well. I've taken a sample in our trial jar just before we aerate the wort, and it's coming out at 1.050. Now we just need to note that down on our instruction manual and keep that for later, because that's going to confirm to us exactly our percentage of alcohol that we've got. So what we need to do is we now need to aerate our wort, and what we do with this, we just get it really going well. Get a good stir going on it, and this is bringing some air and some oxygen back into it, and that's going to help the yeast to do its work. So you need to aerate for a good minute. So now I've aerated my wort, I'm just checking the temperature, because if it's too hot or too cold and we sprinkle the yeast on, the yeast isn't going to start working. So this is smack bang exactly where we need it to be, which is at 20 degrees C. So we're going to take our sachet of yeast that comes in the pack, and we're going to gently sprinkle this all over the surface. Give a good covering all over. Use the whole packet. Excellent. And what we do now is the lid goes on lightly, and this now goes into our warm place. It needs to be kept at 20 degrees C. So what I tend to do is once I've put it in my warm place, I put my thermometer on the top. And my thermometer then will show me as I go and have a quick look at it once I've put it on and check it every day, make sure it's still at 20 degrees C. That then is going to give you the best results for that yeast and give you the best beer that you can potentially get. So this goes into my warm cupboard now for 4 days. My Coldharbour IPA has been in the warm cupboard now for 4 days, and it's frothed up and it's dropped back down quite a bit. And so we now need to dry hop it, and this is where hop pack 3 comes in. And you need your hop pack bag again, which is the long thin one, and I've sterilised it, because remember, everything that's going to come in contact with your beer has to be sterilised. So I've sterilised it, and now in I pop the contents of hop pack 3. And I'm going to simply tie a knot in the bag so the hop pellets can't get out. And this is now like a giant tea bag, a hop tea bag. And all I'm going to do is just lower it in, all the way in, pop the lid back on, and this now goes back into my warm cupboard for another 3 days. These hops are going to add lots and lots of nice citrusy and piney and grapefruity aromas to our beer. Our beer has been in our warm cupboard now for 7 days, and I've taken a reading with my hydrometer, and it's coming out at 1.010. So it's perfect for us to move on to the next stage. So first thing we're going to do is, remember we popped our bag of hops in here last time. Obviously you would have washed your hands before doing this. We're going to give them a little squeeze, because they would have soaked up quite a lot of our beer. We don't need them anymore, we're going to get rid of them. So we give them a little squeeze to get back some of that beer. Okay, the next thing, I'll tell you what, we're going to pop this lot back in, because we don't want to waste any of that. Okay, we're ready to move on now to barreling our beer. So I've already sterilised my barrel here, but it hasn't got yet the tap in. And what we need to do with the tap is you need to get yourself a little pot of Vaseline. They sell little ones for doing your lips with for the women in supermarkets. And we're just going to get a small amount on our finger, and we're literally just going to rub it round the thread. This is going to help get a good seal and make sure that none of our beer leaks out. Okay, and then all we do is we just, come on in James, so we just screw it in like so. Okay, give me 2 seconds to wipe that bit of Vaseline off my finger. I'm wrong-handed, you see, so I've got to change hands. So now keep screwing it in until you can't screw anymore. There we go. Doesn't matter if the tap's on the wrong angle because the tap end does move for you. Okay, next important thing to do. Check that your tap is showing the word off to you. Come on, James, make sure you can see this, because just here we got the word off, and you need to make sure that it's saying off. Okay. You will also have received in your pack a small bag of sugar. And this now needs to go into our barrel. And our small bag of sugar, what this is going to do is this going to aid, it cause what we call a secondary fermentation in the barrel. And that secondary fermentation, once we've put our beer in, will create a head of carbon dioxide, and that does two things. First of all, it helps protect the beer from any bugs, nasties, bacteria, etc. It's also going to cause our beer to come out of our tap with a little bit of force, and that's going to give us a nice good head on our beer when we eventually pull it off. Right, so it's just going to go in there like that for the moment, and I need to go and grab my sterilised siphon, so I'll be back in a moment. I've now got my siphon, and on the end we've got this little bit of kit here, and this is what we call a sediment trap, and that's going to help us to stop any unwanted sediment really getting into our barrel of beer. Because over the last 7 days, our yeast in here and with our hops that we've added, and also from when we did our boil with all our grain, there's little particles within our beer, and all of that now over the last 7 days will have now settled down to the bottom. So there's going to be a good amount of sediment on the bottom, and we want to try and disturb that as little as possible. So into the top of the beer, I'm literally going to just lower my siphon just below the surface, and at this end I'm going to give a good suck. That gets the beer flowing, and as the level of the beer in the bucket gradually drops down, I'm going to lower my siphon with it. So it takes a couple of moments to do this. So there's quite a bit of sediment in the bottom, so what I've done is I've put a little book under one side, and I'm going to gradually tilt it up and up and up, and trying, as you'll see when you do this, to get as little sediment as I possibly can while still maintaining. That's about it, that's about all I'm going to get out of there without getting sediment in. So okay, good, right, so let's pop that back in there. And we don't need this because this is just mangy sediment, so let me get rid of that for the moment. We can get rid of the cookery book as well. So, remember that we put our priming sugar in here earlier, so we need to give it a good stir to get it all thoroughly dissolved. And the best way I find to do it with these 2-inch caps is literally get the handle in from our beer paddle. Give it a good stir, make sure all the sugar's dissolved. There we go. Take the cap, and this is where you need to make sure the cap is on very, very tight. Okay, so we make sure we get a good seal. Because, as I said, the yeast that's now still in our beer is going to react with the sugar we've put in there, and it's going to create a secondary fermentation to create our gap of carbon dioxide at the top. To do this, this now needs to go back into my warm cupboard for another 48 hours. And that's going to allow the yeast to do its job. After 48 hours, we need to transfer it to somewhere nice and cool, ideally about 15 degrees Celsius. And we're going to leave it for about 2 to 4 weeks. The longer you can leave it, the better. Now what we're going to do then, in 2 to 4 weeks, is we're going to pull off a small amount into a glass. And we're going to get rid of that because there'll be quite a bit of sediment in the bottom of the tap here, and we just want to clear the tap of that. Then you're going to do what you've been wanting to do for the last few weeks, and that's pull off a full pint, sit down, chill out, and enjoy your first pint of all grain beer made by you with your equipment in your kitchen. Cheers! Happy brewing!